For centuries, humanity was classified as irrelevant. A footnote in the stellar archives. A developing species trapped on a gravity-heavy world with inefficient propulsion, fragile biology, and a distressing tendency toward internal conflict. The Galactic Council barely bothered to assign Earth a proper designation. They called humans persistent, the way one might describe a fungus, difficult to eradicate, but ultimately harmless. Ignored by the galaxy. Dismissed by those in power. While empires rose and fell across the stars, humanity was left alone to struggle, to fracture, to rebuild. The Council assumed this neglect was mercy. In truth, it was convenience. Why waste attention on a species that could not even survive unshielded vacuum for more than seconds? No one realized how dangerous that mistake would be. Because while the galaxy measured strength in fleets, megastructures, and raw destructive yield, humanity measured something else entirely. Adaptation. By the time the Council noticed Earth again, it was already too late. The signal that triggered humanity's invitation was not a distress call or a plea for aid. It was a completed translation of a Council encryption protocol, one thought mathematically impossible for a pre-FTL civilization to decipher. Humans didn't just crack it. They replied. The chamber fell silent the day humanity arrived. Not because they were impressive. Because they weren't. No towering war forms. No radiant energy shields. No biological augmentations or ceremonial intimidation displays. Just a delegation of soft-skinned bipeds in simple attire, walking calmly into a room that had humbled conquerors and broken kings. They did not bow. They did not kneel. They looked around with something far worse than fear. Curiosity. The Council speaker began the proceedings as tradition demanded, by asserting authority, by reminding humanity of its place. He spoke of galactic law, of hierarchy, of compliance. The humans listened politely. Then one of them asked a question. A simple one. It wasn't a challenge. It wasn't a threat. It was a logistical inquiry. And that was when the Council made its second mistake. Because humanity had not come to beg for acceptance. They had come to understand the system. To map it. To measure it. To test its assumptions. The galaxy believed power was enforced from the top down. Humanity knew better. Power, they had learned, belonged to whoever could endure the most pressure without breaking, and then calmly ask if there was more. By the end of that first session, nothing had exploded. No fleets were mobilized. No ultimatums were issued. Yet every ancient species in attendance felt it. Authority does not vanish in a moment of violence. It disappears the instant someone stops believing in it. And the Galactic Council would soon learn a truth humanity had mastered long ago. The most dangerous species in the universe is not the strongest. It is the one that refuses to be intimidated. The Galactic Council did not respond to humanity with war. That would have required courage. Instead, they did what they had perfected over 10,000 cycles. They tightened their grip. At first, it was subtle, procedural delays, regulatory reviews, temporary suspensions. Human trade vessels found their docking requests unanswered. Supply convoys were rerouted. Banking nodes flagged human transactions for excessive scrutiny, freezing entire economic sectors overnight. The official explanation was standard compliance realignment. In practice, it was strangulation. Trade was cut. Rare metals from outer systems vanished from human markets. Medical isotopes were suddenly classified as restricted materials. Energy credits devalued without warning, triggering shortages that rippled across colonies that had only just begun to stabilize. Human diplomats protested. The Council ignored them. Rights were revoked. Human observers lost their voting privileges, then their speaking privileges, then their right to attend sessions at all. Travel permits were rescinded. Information access was curtailed. Entire data libraries went dark to human queries, replaced with sterile notices citing security concerns. Humanity was quietly reclassified. Not an equal member. Not even a provisional one. An external variable. Isolation followed. No fleets blockaded Earth. No weapons were fired. The Council didn't need spectacle. They believed pressure, applied evenly and relentlessly, would do the work for them. It always had. Cut off a species from trade, and it starves. Cut it off from diplomacy, and it fractures. Cut it off from information, and it regresses. The Council had watched it happen hundreds of times. They expected collapse. They expected riots in the streets of Earth's megacities. Expected colonial governors to declare independence. Expected humanity's famously divided nature to finally tear itself apart under strain. What they got instead was silence. Human supply chains rerouted within weeks. Old manufacturing sectors reactivated. Local industries scaled beyond projections that had once been dismissed as inefficient. Colonies stopped requesting imports entirely. Human networks adapted. Council analysts flagged the data as anomalous. Then came the second surprise. Humanity did not retreat inward. They reached outward, just not through official channels. Independent traders began appearing on routes long abandoned by Council fleets. Blacklisted systems reported sudden infrastructure upgrades of unknown origin. Council-aligned species noticed fluctuations in their own markets, subtle but persistent. Someone was bypassing Council oversight. Someone was teaching others how. The Council issued sanctions. Humanity responded by complying with every written rule, while exploiting every unwritten assumption. No law forbade sharing engineering principles. No statute restricted logistical optimization. No regulation accounted for a species that treated adversity as a design problem. Where other civilizations broke under isolation, humanity treated it like a challenge. A puzzle. A stress test. Council authority depended on dependency. Humanity removed itself from the equation. Worse still, they began documenting everything. Every restriction. Every delay. Every revoked right. Every silent dismissal. They archived it, time-stamped it, cross-referenced it, not as a grievance, but as data. The Council mistook patience for submission. They believed humanity was learning its place. What humanity was actually learning was the system. Its blind spots. Its bottlenecks. Its fear of disorder. The Council had pushed humanity into isolation expecting decay. Instead, they had created something far more dangerous. A species with nothing left to lose. And plenty of time to think. Isolation was supposed to fracture humanity. That was the assumption written into every Council projection, every predictive model, every quiet discussion held behind closed doors. Humanity was documented as volatile, politically divided, culturally fragmented, historically prone to internal conflict. Pressure, the Council believed, would finish what time had not. They were wrong. Isolation didn't break humanity. It unified them. At first, the changes were subtle. Political arguments grew quieter. Long-standing trade disputes were shelved temporarily. Old rivalries lost urgency when every transmission from beyond human space returned unanswered. The galaxy had spoken. Humanity was on its own. And something ancient stirred in response. Old divisions vanished, not because humanity had suddenly become peaceful, but because priorities realigned. Borders mattered less when every colony faced the same threat. Ideologies mattered less when survival was no longer theoretical. Emergency councils formed on Earth, Mars, Luna, and the outer colonies, then dissolved just as quickly, replaced by something leaner, faster, and brutally pragmatic. A unified command. Not born of conquest. Not imposed by force. Agreed upon. For the first time in human history, every major power signed the same document without amendments or reservations. There were no speeches. No celebrations. Just signatures, confirmations, and a shared understanding of what came next. If no one else would protect them, they would protect themselves. The unified human compact did not announce itself to the galaxy. It didn't need to. Shipyards once owned by rival corporations synchronized production schedules within days. Military research divisions opened sealed archives and shared breakthroughs that had been guarded for generations. Civilian engineers found themselves working alongside defense analysts, supply officers, and theoretical physicists, with no concern for patents or profit. Efficiency replaced ego. Human colonies stopped asking the Council for permission. They stopped asking anyone. Every system was evaluated, not for prestige or expansion, but for resilience. Could it operate independently? Could it sustain population loss? Could it adapt if cut off again tomorrow? If the answer was no, humanity fixed it. Together. Supply lines were redesigned with redundancy bordering on paranoia. Agricultural worlds diversified crops beyond council standard models. Energy grids shifted toward decentralized generation. No single failure point was allowed to exist. Human doctrine changed. Defense was no longer about winning wars. It was about surviving them. Council observers, those few still monitoring human space, noticed something unsettling. Human fleets were not growing faster. They were growing smarter. Ships were modular. Crews were cross-trained. Command structures emphasized autonomy rather than hierarchy. Every captain understood logistics. Every logistics officer understood strategy. Every citizen understood sacrifice. Children learned evacuation drills alongside mathematics. Colonists trained in emergency response as routinely as they trained for their professions. Humanity didn't militarize its population. It prepared it. And preparation bred confidence. For the first time, humanity stopped broadcasting distress signals into the void. They stopped requesting aid. They stopped framing their future around external validation. The silence unsettled the council. Isolation had always created desperation before. Humanity responded with organization. Unity did not make humanity loud. It made them focused. Where other species rallied around symbols and leaders, humanity rallied around procedures, plans, contingencies, quiet competence. There were no grand declarations of revenge, no oaths sworn beneath burning banners. Just a single, shared premise. Never again. Never again would human survival depend on the goodwill of distant authorities. Never again would trade routes decide whether children ate or colonies lived. Never again would humanity mistake participation in a system for protection by it. The Council still believed humanity was contained. They mistook coordination for compliance. They mistook silence for submission. What they failed to see was that humanity had not withdrawn. They had consolidated. Every colony, every fleet, every mind, all standing under one command. And when humanity finally looked back toward the galaxy, it was not with anger. It was with readiness. In silence, humanity evolved. No declarations were made. No triumphs broadcast. No symbols raised for the galaxy to analyze and misunderstand. Humanity had learned the cost of visibility and chose obscurity instead. The Council believed isolation had frozen human progress. What it had actually done was remove distractions. Freed from Council regulations, humanity abandoned standardized designs that favored compatibility over performance. Old limitations vanished overnight. Engineers stopped asking whether something was approved and started asking whether it worked. New engines came first. Not faster-than-light breakthroughs, that would have drawn attention, but something subtler. Drives that burned cleaner, ran longer, required fewer exotic materials. Human vessels began crossing their own territory with efficiencies that Council projections insisted were impossible. Human ships didn't outrun anyone. They didn't need to. They never had to stop. Then came the shields. Council doctrine relied on layered energy barriers, powerful, expensive, and brittle under sustained pressure. Humanity went another direction. Redundant fields. Adaptive harmonics. Systems that degraded gracefully instead of catastrophically. A human shield could fail in 100 places and still function. Not unbreakable. Unyielding. Weapons development followed, but not in the way the galaxy expected. Humanity did not chase superweapons or planet killers. They studied endurance. Reliability. Systems that could be repaired under fire by crews trained to improvise with whatever was on hand. Human weapons didn't win wars quickly. They won them eventually. Fleets were built in silence. No massive armadas concentrated in visible shipyards. Instead, production was distributed. Modular hulls assembled in dozens of locations. Components fabricated on civilian worlds, hidden among routine industrial output. A fleet that could not be crippled by a single strike. Ships designed not for conquest, but for survival. Human fleet doctrine was simple. No ship was irreplaceable. No commander was indispensable. No plan relied on perfection. Every vessel carried independent fabrication units. Every crew trained for prolonged isolation. Every formation assumed communications loss as the default, not the exception. If cut off, a human fleet didn't retreat. It adapted. The Council never noticed. Their sensors saw no mass mobilization. Their spies reported no aggressive posturing. Human space looked quiet, predictable, boring, exactly as intended. While the galaxy looked away, humanity prepared. Not for revenge. For inevitability. Humanity understood something the Council never had: systems fail. Alliances fracture. Authority erodes. Stability is temporary, no matter how ancient it appears. So they built for the moment when the system stopped working. Training simulations grew harsher. Scenarios assumed overwhelming odds, hostile environments, and total diplomatic isolation. Victory conditions were rewritten. Not defeat the enemy. Ensure continuation. Human command doctrine shifted again, away from centralized brilliance and toward distributed competence. Every officer was trained to assume command. Every unit empowered to act without permission if necessary. Chaos was no longer feared. It was planned for. The Council mistook restraint for limitation. They believed humanity lacked ambition. What humanity lacked was illusion. They did not believe the galaxy owed them fairness. They did not believe authority was permanent. And they certainly did not believe safety came from being liked. It came from being ready. By the time the first Council analysts noticed anomalies, unexplained efficiency spikes, missing material flows, strange performance reports, it was already too late to intervene quietly. Humanity was no longer developing. They were finished. Waiting. And when the galaxy finally turned its gaze back toward human space, it would not find a weak species struggling in isolation. It would find something far more unsettling. A civilization that had prepared for this moment in complete silence, and survived long enough to decide what came next. The first reports were dismissed as exaggerations. A border system gone silent. A trade relay destroyed. A minor species failing to respond to routine check-ins. The Council had seen this before. Piracy. Internal revolt. Local instability. Nothing worth convening an emergency session over. Then a second system fell. Then a third. By the time the name the Dominion entered Council records, it was already too late for containment. They did not announce themselves. They did not negotiate. They arrived in force, efficient, overwhelming, and utterly indifferent to galactic norms. Their fleets were uniform, disciplined, and terrifyingly methodical. No grand displays of cruelty. No ideological broadcasts. Just conquest. Worlds fell in days. Planetary defenses designed to repel conventional invasions were dismantled with surgical precision. Orbital stations vanished in controlled detonations. Infrastructure was seized intact whenever possible, repurposed with cold efficiency. Species were enslaved. Not exterminated, catalogued. Populations were sorted by utility. Labor, administration, biological resources. Resistance was met with immediate, disproportionate retaliation, not to punish, but to educate. The message was clear. Submission ensured survival. Defiance ensured suffering. Refugees flooded neighboring systems, carrying fragments of horror and disbelief. Entire civilizations that had existed for millennia collapsed in the span of weeks. Council-aligned fleets engaged the Dominion and were erased, not spectacularly, but cleanly, as if they had never mattered. And still, the Council debated. Emergency sessions devolved into procedural deadlock. Ancient rivalries resurfaced. Voting blocs argued jurisdiction, response thresholds, and the economic consequences of intervention. Some called for negotiation. Others for containment. A few suggested sacrifice, ceding outer systems to buy time. Time, the Dominion proved, was not something the Council possessed. As systems burned, Council authority fractured. Member species began withdrawing fleets to protect their own borders. Trade agreements were suspended. Mutual defense clauses were reinterpreted, delayed, or quietly ignored. The great alliance that had ruled the galaxy through consensus revealed its true nature under pressure. It could not act unless everyone agreed. The Dominion did not need agreement. They needed momentum. Within months, the invasion fronts crept closer to core Council space. Panic spread. The Council's oldest assumptions, about deterrence, balance, and inevitability, collapsed under the weight of reality. For the first time in recorded history, the Council faced an enemy it could not intimidate, outmaneuver, or outlast. And that was when someone said the word no one wanted to hear. Humanity. The chamber fell silent. Objections came immediately. Humanity was isolated, sanctioned, politically marginalized. Their fleets were untested, their technology unknown. Some council members still clung to the belief that humanity was barely holding itself together. Others remembered. They remembered the silence, the withdrawal from dependency, the way human space had gone dark, not chaotic, but calm. Reluctantly, the Council authorized a diplomatic overture. Not an apology. Not a reinstatement of rights. A request. Humanity received it without ceremony. The message was brief, carefully worded, and steeped in urgency. It spoke of shared survival, mutual threats, and the need for unity against a greater danger. It avoided mentioning sanctions. Avoided acknowledging isolation. Avoided admitting fear. Humanity noticed. They took their time responding. While Council worlds burned, humanity reviewed the data. Dominion fleet compositions. Engagement patterns. Logistical behavior. They cross-referenced it against their own simulations, some of which had predicted this scenario with unsettling accuracy. The Council expected desperation. They got analysis. When humanity finally replied, it was not with fleets or promises. It was with questions, clarifications, assumptions challenged, requests for transparency the Council had never granted anyone before. And then, finally, a single statement. Humanity would consider involvement. On conditions. The Council balked. But the Dominion did not wait. Another system fell, this one uncomfortably close to the core. The screams of evacuation channels echoed through the chamber as Council members watched their authority crumble in real time. They had no leverage left. They had sanctioned the one civilization that had prepared for this moment. They had isolated the species that built for survival instead of dominance. And now, facing annihilation, the galaxy had no choice but to turn to the very people it had tried to break. The Council did not realize it yet, but the moment they asked humanity for help, they surrendered the last thing they had left. Control. The Council expected forgiveness. They had prepared statements, carefully crafted phrases invoking unity, regret, and shared destiny. Some even rehearsed apologies, though none planned to admit fault outright. History, they believed, would smooth the edges. Humanity would understand. Survival demanded cooperation. Humanity did understand. Just not in the way the Council hoped. The reply arrived without delay, encryption flawless, routing direct. No ceremonial headers. No flowery diplomatic language. Just a simple acknowledgement of receipt and a request for confirmation that the message had been delivered in full. The Council confirmed. Then they waited. What came next was not outrage. Not accusations. Not vengeance. Humanity answered calmly. Their message was brief. Precise. Almost unsettling in its restraint. They acknowledged the Dominion threat. They confirmed the accuracy of the data provided. They stated that they were capable of engaging such an enemy. Then came the line that ended the Council's authority forever. We will decide when to act. No justification followed. No reassurance was offered. The Council erupted. Some demanded immediate clarification. Others called the response irresponsible, arrogant, even dangerous. A few attempted to reassert authority, invoking treaties, obligations, and the very sanctions they had imposed only cycles before. Humanity did not respond. They didn't need to, because the galaxy felt the shift before it understood it. Deep space sensors, ancient arrays tuned to detect gravitational distortions, registered anomalies along the edge of human-controlled space. Not spikes. Not explosions. Rhythmic fluctuations. as if space itself were breathing. Navigation beacons reported micro-instabilities. Jump routes near human territory recalibrated without explanation. Long-range observatories detected harmonics where none should exist, resonances threading through the void like tension drawn too tight. Engineers blamed instrument drift. They were wrong. Within hours, independent traders reported sightings. Not fleets. Not formations. Movements. Shadows where nothing should have been. Patterns emerging and vanishing just beyond the edge of perception. Human space had not mobilized. It had activated. The Council demanded answers. Humanity remained silent. Then came the final transmission. A courtesy, nothing more. Humanity informed the Council that any engagement with the Dominion would occur on human terms, in human-selected theaters, and according to human operational doctrine. Council authorization was not required. Council oversight would not be permitted. This was not a threat. It was a boundary. For the first time since its founding, the Galactic Council was not the highest authority deciding the fate of the galaxy. It was an observer. And somewhere beyond the sanctioned lanes, beyond the collapsing borders and burning systems, something ancient and terrible took notice. The Dominion's advance slowed. Just slightly. As if it, too, had felt the tremor. The Dominion never saw the fleets arrive. There were no jump signatures. No energy flares. No warning echoes rippling through subspace. One moment, the invasion armada advanced unopposed, thousands of warships in disciplined formation, confidence hardened by weeks of effortless conquest. The next, space changed. Human fleets emerged in perfect silence. They did not tear their way into real space. They unfolded from it, vast structures resolving from nothingness as if the void itself had decided to take shape. No distortion storms. No navigational chaos. Just presence. Massive. Precise. Unstoppable. The Dominion's forward sensors lagged behind reality, struggling to reconcile mass where none had existed a heartbeat before. By the time targeting systems caught up, the human fleets were already in position, interlocking formations spanning light minutes, each vessel exactly where it needed to be. Not clustered. Distributed. A net cast across the stars. Council observers watching from distant relays felt something colder than awe. Recognition. This was not a show of force. It was containment. Human ships did not maneuver aggressively. They didn't charge weapons or broadcast threats. They simply were, cutting off vectors, severing retreat paths, occupying gravitational anchors the Dominion relied on for mobility. The Dominion reacted instantly. Orders cascaded through their fleet. Power surged to weapons. Attack formations began to coalesce. They never completed. Every Dominion command channel, military, logistical, encrypted fallback, even emergency tight beam links, was overridden simultaneously. Not jammed. Not disrupted. Replaced. One message crossed every frequency, every protocol, every language the Dominion possessed. Stand down. It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was final. The Dominion fired anyway. They always did. The first volley never reached its targets. Human defenses didn't intercept the incoming fire, they absorbed it. Energy bled harmlessly into adaptive fields that reshaped themselves in real time, distributing impact across hulls designed to endure far worse than this. The second volley crippled the Dominion's own ships. Not through counterfire. Through absence. Weapons systems lost synchronization. Power grids desynced by fractions of a second, enough to cascade failures across vessels built for precision, not resilience. Drives stalled. Shields collapsed inward. Ships began to drift, dead in space, crews alive but helpless. Humanity had not attacked the fleet. They had turned it off. Across the formation, Dominion commanders struggled to regain control. Some attempted self-destruct protocols. Those failed too. Human systems reached into Dominion architecture with intimate familiarity, exploiting assumptions, dependencies, and redundancies that Dominion engineers had never imagined could be used against them. One by one, thousands of ships went dark. No explosions. No debris fields. Just silence. The human fleet finally moved. A single formation advanced, not to destroy, but to demonstrate. One ship detached, gliding forward with deliberate calm. Its hull bore no markings, no insignia, no declaration of ownership. It transmitted once more. This conflict is concluded. There was no negotiation window, no demand for surrender. The Dominion's command hierarchy collapsed within minutes. Fleets in neighboring systems received the data and halted their advance without being asked. Slave transports powered down. Occupation forces abandoned positions, unsure whether movement itself would trigger annihilation. The war ended before the enemy understood it had begun. Only then did humanity acknowledge the galaxy. A brief, open broadcast, accessible to every species, every relay, every world that had watched the Council fail. Humanity had not come to rule. They had not come to punish. They had come to end the threat. And as the last Dominion ship drifted powerless in the dark, one truth became impossible to ignore. The Galactic Council had not lost authority because humanity seized it. They lost it because authority no longer mattered. The galaxy had seen who could act, and who could only argue while worlds burned. The Council tried to reclaim control. Emergency charters were drafted. Authority clauses were reaffirmed. Special sessions were convened to reassert jurisdiction over post-war space. They spoke of oversight, coordination, and the need to restore balance after humanity's intervention. The galaxy listened. And then it moved on. It was too late. Because authority, once exposed as unnecessary, does not return by proclamation. The Council still had chambers, still had titles, still had procedures refined over millennia. But every species now understood what those things were worth when the Dominion came. Nothing. Worlds rebuilt without waiting for Council approval. Defense pacts formed laterally, not hierarchically. Trade resumed along routes humanity had stabilized, not the ones the Council had sanctioned. When disputes arose, they were resolved with quiet consultation, not votes. The Council noticed something else. No one asked humanity for permission either. And that terrified them more than conquest ever could have. Humanity did not rule the galaxy. They declined every offer of permanent leadership, refused formal seats of power, ignored calls to restructure the Council with themselves at the center. They made no attempt to legislate, tax, or command. They simply stayed ready. Human fleets withdrew, not back to hidden shipyards or fortified borders, but into patterns that made no political sense. Distributed, mobile, present, yet unobtrusive. Always just far enough away to avoid dependence. Humanity had not replaced the Council. They had rendered it optional. The truth settled slowly, but it settled everywhere. Power no longer flowed from titles or ancient agreements. It flowed from capability, from preparation, from the proven willingness to act when others froze. And humanity had proven something else, too. They did not need fear to maintain peace. The Dominion survivors told stories, quiet ones, shared only among officers and engineers. Stories not of human weapons, but of human restraint. Of fleets that could have annihilated them and chose instead to end the war cleanly, efficiently. Finally, that restraint carried more weight than terror ever had. The Council tried one last time to assert relevance. They issued statements warning of instability, of the dangers of a galaxy without centralized authority. Humanity did not respond. They never did. Because the galaxy had learned the difference between rule and guardianship. Humanity was not watching the galaxy from a throne. They were watching it from the dark. Not as conquerors. Not as overseers. As a contingency. A quiet certainty took root across the stars, a truth no council edict could erase. If darkness rises again, if another dominion emerges, if the void sends something worse, humanity will be there. Not to rule the galaxy, but to make sure it survives.